and the games are about to get underway. I'm so excited to see Game 1 of the semifinals of YCS Minneapolis. That is an 11, a very, very strong roll. Another 11.
11.
I think that's, I couldn't even tell what that was, honestly, but that is lower, it has to be, that's a 4.
You want first?
Yes. Sounds like Chris is going first. So here we are, top 4, YCS Minneapolis.
Well, we talk about this again and again. He does have access to terraforming, which will let him go into the field spell, and that is just one of the strongest starts the tournament strategy can ever have.
Sure. Yeah, we already commented on what the most ideal opening play is. And I guess it may actually be Fenrir before we jump to the field spell.
Yeah, I think it goes field spell, Fenrir field spell, and then instant fusion Fenrir field spell.
And he has at least 2 of those. So here he gets to search out an additional copy of Fenrir.
I'm going to go right back in. Should we do it every time?
You guys can agree on
that's fine.
Yep, just going into the terraforming now, going to activate that Parallel Reno, get another tier limit monster from his deck to his hand. Now, you say that he is playing the Sprite engine as well as the tier limit engine. We can see clearly that he's trying to lead with the tier limit engine. What do you think he's trying to do with the Sprite engine here?
Well, I think he's trying to establish, if he can possibly get into it, Sprite Elf with some form of negation. He has a single copy of Sprite Red. We see that he's foregoing some of the Sprite cards in his deck. He's not playing Carrot, for example. But he's also playing the interruptions such as Smashers. So I think he's just trying to establish a diversified field.
Right, really getting a lot of value from potential cards such as Dark to face off against opposing Sprite matchups, which can be really useful against Marcus here, just having Sprite cards in your deck. So you're ever able to summon Dark, you can immediately access those monsters by using your opponent's monsters. That's a strategy I've used before. It's been quite strong.
What's interesting, looking at his deck list, is he has the Nimble package in there, which also works really well with the tier elements, but he's foregoing access to Totally Awesome. So it'll be interesting to see what he passes with once he goes into the Sprite package. Potentially IP Masquerena could be his primary form of interruption.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, after he does his entire tier limit combo, I imagine he's going to summon a gigantic Sprite with like a Link 2 and a Merly that he manages to keep off the field after using his kick close. And then we'll see what that monster summons and what direction he wants to take. Maybe just goes for the blue into the Jet, maybe links off those into IP Masquerena and Elf, and then you have the Smashers.
Perfect.
Sure. Because it doesn't seem like he simply doesn't have Toad in his deck. So we've seen some Sprite tier element strategies incorporate Totally Awesome. That's not the case here.
Not normal summoned.
He also has 2 Sprite Sprints in his extra deck, which is an interesting choice, really valuing the flexibility of using the effect on an additional turn to potentially send a Merly.
Yeah, I guess like having the ability to use that Foolish Burial type effect via any Link 2 is pretty strong, I'd say. I guess if you were to play 2 copies of Foolish Burial, if you had access to it, would you?
I think you would. When you have to think about it, typically you only use it once because you use the Nimble Angler, and then you're basically locked out of using that type of effect. But if you have a tier element package in your deck as well, you do get value from using that Foolish Burial effect twice.
All right, so now Christopher, off of the effect of kick close, manages to hit a couple targets here. The Rhino Heart will be able to send, the Angler will be able to summon Beavers from deck, assuming there's not any in the hand, because there's not any in the graveyard.
I don't see any. And he is playing 3, so it's unlikely that that would be the case.
Yeah, so going to send them early off the Rhino Heart. Let's see. Going to attempt to use the Sharon, maybe the Merly as well, and then the Angler.
2.
Now, just to remember, which effect was the one that had already been used in order to summon the kick close in the first place? I got a feeling it was Havness, but we'll make sure later. And then this should be using the remainder of the effects.
Now we can see him summon 2 Nimble Beavers from his deck.
I'm sorry, Sharon.
I imagine this is going to maybe go into something like Rule Close, just trying to set you up, make sure you're safe from things like Nibiru, even though it hasn't been popular in this tournament so far.
I think at this point of the tournament, there's also the likelihood that he knows his opponent's on Runic Sprite, which is a deck that generally doesn't play Nibiru.
Yeah, but then I think at that point, Rule Close is pretty good against that deck.
Oh, it's fantastic against the deck in general.
Just honestly, fairly strong card on its own.
Against everything except maybe Flauandereeze, quite frankly, at this point.
Sure.
All right, here it is. We're going to go into a rank 2 using those beavers in the extra monster zone, even giving himself some space.
That's fine.
He's thinking ahead about how many monsters he actually needs to put into the main monster zone in order to complete his opening play.
Yep, going to use its effect. I don't think he has normal summon yet either. This is something to consider. So there is a Merly in his hand. You can use that later.
Effect.
We're just going to go ahead and special summon Sprite Blue here. Grab the Jet.
Effect.
Jet gets Smashers. This is a pretty common play here.
Because the red has been milled this turn, we can almost guarantee that he's going to go into Smashers as opposed to a Sprite Starter. Sometimes you elect to search Sprite Starter because you can search a card like Sprite Red from your deck, but when you've already milled it, you don't need to do that.
I'm surprised he even plays a Sprite Starter. Usually when you have such a heavy tier limit engine, that's just the card you never want to activate. But I guess it's like a way to get out that red that you mentioned earlier. And now you can just get it out with Elf, so that makes a lot of sense.
I was surprised too, but it is a single copy of Sprite Starter, so he has that flexibility on his Jet searches. You know, when you do mill so much, you do want to ensure that you still have a target in your deck.
I wonder if it's worth playing something along the lines of Double Cross in an engine like this.
Or even just a second Smashers.
I guess he wanted to keep it minimalistic. I don't think the Sprite cards are ever the cards you wanted to open. When I played it similar to this at the YCS in Rio, like almost a month ago or several points ago, if we found out that the tier card or the Sprite cards are the ones you never want to see, and you just want to lead with the tier cards and let the Sprite cards just happen.
Yeah, you started this turn really by asking ultimately what the Sprite package would probably do in this strategy, and we see exactly that. We see Red, we see Elf, and we see Smashers in combination with IP Masquerena. So a pretty formidable opening play here from Chris.
And then Fenrir just kind of happened to be there. You know, like if you open it, why not? He's just going to sit untargetable because of the Sprite Elf.
In draw phase.
Yep.
Yeah, draw phase.
Oh, he's attempting to activate on the Flashing Fire. Almost tried to target the Fenrir, realized he couldn't because of the Sprite Elf. Had to go after the Sprite Elf. Makes sense that you would do this in the draw phase so that Sprite Elf couldn't be activated.
Yep, definitely something you need to be wary of if you have quick plays in your deck like this, or cards like Infinite Impermanence that you want to take advantage of your draw or standby phase to activate those effects to circumvent cards like IP or Sprite Elf from being used.
Getting to banish the top two cards as well as one of the residual effects of the runic cards. Nothing super relevant. A Beaver and a Tactics. I think Christopher can live without those cards. You just really don't want to see any of the tier names get banished because even though you have 3 of each of them, the more you get banished, the less likely any of the tier effects that you mill will trigger another one.
And I also think in general, because Chris got to open up the game going first, some of the singleton cards like Red and Smashes have already been searched. Had Marcus been able to go first and actually hit some of those cards, it could put a dent into Chris's strategy where all of a sudden some of these one-ofs get banished off the top of his deck.
Yeah, those residual banishes are a lot stronger against hybrid strategies like this that have a minimalistic engine of one part. You can really cut that engine really thin when you just lose a single one-of.
Absolutely.
Now, Sprite Starter, a really strong card when you're playing the pure Sprite strategy. Well, at least a pure level 2 strategy, such as the Runics as well.
Yeah, I don't know if there's really a pure Sprite deck anymore. It really always has to be incorporated with something, even something like the Nimble package. I would consider that at least a bit of a hybrid.
Yeah, I don't know. I was giving it the benefit of the doubt and just saying, like, that's just pure Sprite at that point. Like, the Nimble stuff, you know, are you really going to consider that a different deck? It's just
I guess
additional
not.
Sprite extenders. Like, was Diva, like, are you going to call it Deep Sea Sprite?
I guess when you're playing 6 cards, though, it just feels like it's taking up such a big portion of your deck.
That's fair. I wonder what the threshold is before you add the other name to it.
And is it Sprite Beaver? Nimble Sprites?
Yeah, Nimble Sprite seems pretty good. That sounds like it would be a card. It might be a card.
Someday. Okay, so now we see Fenrir. This is actually the first time, I think, all weekend, at least that I have seen Fenrir in the feature match area, banish a card.
Yeah, honestly, it's just been a body for most of the time. It's been, well, it's not that the banish has not been relevant. It's just that it's forced something out immediately, and something was used to remove it before it was able to banish something important.
Yeah.
And now it's similar in this instance because you're able to get the fountain off the field. Fenrir is able to banish any face-up card, so you definitely don't want to allow it to be used on the fountain.
You like to choose it here on the Sprite Blue, which does make sense. You do want to cut your opponent off at level 2s when you're playing against Sprite as much as possible. And with Fenrir, it feels like such a free interaction.
This is just so difficult, though, to go after level 2 monsters against the runic version, because every spell is just also a level 2 monster.
Absolutely, definitely something to consider.
Dispelling, I'm assuming using the effect to special summon doesn't make a lot of sense to go for the other effect because a card wasn't added to hand in this instance. Could opt to use the effect of Rule Close here to just go ahead and negate it.
Yeah, that seems to be what he's considering.
Cuts off a potential draw 2 as well.
Negate.
And then
Doesn't
really
send
just
for
puts
cost
Marcus
here.
on having another runic spell. But if he does have another runic spell, that's a draw
sorry?
3.
It doesn't send for cost, right?
Correct, it does not.
So Marcus clarifying that it doesn't tend for cost, potentially has a copy of something like Freezing Curses in his hand.
Yeah, that would definitely work.
That
Yeah, there's no
is-
Sprite Elf on the field stopping monster targeting.
Not anymore.
Chain effect is special.
Oh, there's a Runic Destruction also trying to go for the special summon effect. This is rough. Chris needs a way to try to deal with the fountain, if not anything else. I think if he plays a copy of Nightmare Unicorn, I would elect to use the IP Masquerena here.
Unfortunately, he's not. I think it's really just the smashers that he has set.
I suppose it's good enough.
It's interesting, though, that there is no unicorn. I was actually looking at his extra deck. He has some interesting choices in terms of link monsters. Beat Cop, for example.
Yeah, I wonder what that's for. Typically, when you see Beat Cop, it's meant to be used with something
Let's
along
go
the
here.
lines of Mystic Bind so you can consolidate
So
your
get
monsters.
negated.
Maybe he's just using it as a generic link
special.
too.
It's gotta be extra monster.
I think so. I mean, he's elected to play 2 Sprite and Beat Cop over Nightmare Unicorn.
And then new chain, turn player.
I'm sure there's a reasoning
So,
for it that he
chain link
can
one,
eventually explain to us
targeting these
if it gets to that point.
Chain link, are you using, or no?
No.
Alright, so
Opting
chain
not to
link
use
1,
the effect of the Hugin.
This is going to be chain link 2. This is going to be like chain link 3.
Yeah, I guess when you're using IP to summon Sprint, you might as well also have a Sprint to summon on your turn.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, particularly if you have Merly in your deck.
Yeah, this seems like a really strong use. You're able to use the Sprint, and you're able to get rid of the Fountain. Like, Marcus having the body on the field, being able to summon Jet, not really all that relevant, especially if you're able to just trigger the Merly to go into something along the lines of Dragos Tapelia to stop
So
the
response.
Jet once it gets to the field.
Yeah, I think Chris is sequencing these plays really well.
Yeah, he's no stranger to these cards and how these interact. He's been playing like the last several events in a row. He's definitely played against a lot of Sprite, definitely played against a lot of Runic Sprite. So he's, and you know, having Sprite cards in his deck as well, he knows exactly how to counter the strategy.
Yeah, he's prioritizing getting rid of Fountain, which is arguably the most important
And
piece
I'll send for my.
when playing against Runics.
So here we go, able to send the Merly from the deck to the grave because of the effect of Sprite Sprint.
Yes.
Marcus has no response here. I would assume Dragos Tapelia is the card you want, but I also think Kaleido Heart is very reasonable in this instance if there is a Rhino Heart in the grave, and there is.
Spin back to Hugin.
But I think Dragos Tapelia is fine because you can also just use the effect of the field spell to destroy the Hugin as well.
Yeah, that's true.
That field spell always coming in clutch.
It really depends on does he think he can activate the
1,
field spell at
2,
any other point
hop.
during the turn.
I think resolving a kit, though, also applies so much pressure to Marcus. He has no battle phase. He's used 4 cards in his hand trying to get rid of the field and just getting bigger and bigger.
One of the things that we've seen this weekend from the Runic deck is if that first field spell activation gets negated or destroyed, or in this case banished, it can be really difficult to come back if you don't get that draw 3. If
Yeah.
you do get that draw 3, though, it's almost like it becomes
has to
insurmountable.
activate, right? When
Yeah,
it's popped,
the deck is very
has to go
reliant
back.
on the fountain to amass its resources. Otherwise, these are just mostly one-for-one effects, not really generating
And I
as much
just used,
value.
What's so far?
And then you also,
just
the
use
limitation
the-
of the battle phase is going to be super significant here because it's really hard to deal with these monsters without having a battle phase. So sending the Rhino Heart off of the effect of
effect.
Kiklos, the Rhino Heart is being able to discard a Merly. That Merly will not be able to activate. He's already used that one this turn.
But he will be able to send whichever one he needs with Rhino Heart, but it doesn't matter because Marcus has seen enough. And that's our first game in the top 4.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for Marcus to concede there. We all know that he had a Jet that he searched off the blue, and then one other card. There's not many other cards that he could really have to get him out of this situation.
No, I think because Chris was able to prioritize smashers on the Runic Fountain, Marcus was just never able to come back.
Yeah, very powerful showing from the Chillman Sprite deck. The incremental advantage from the Sprite engine, being able to make it that much easier to go into Sprint on your opponent's turn, setting up the smashers to have just more layered interaction that you can go after. Like a lot of removal, right? The Tier Limit engine is really good at setting up these monster negates, set up these soft interactions to deal with monsters on the field. And the Sprite cards give you access to routes that you can interact with things that aren't monsters. The Smashers is one of the most flexible interruptions in the game, and just being able to add that to the Tier Limit field already makes it one of the stronger decks in this tournament.
Yeah, we started this match by asking, what does the Sprite engine give the Tier Element deck? And if you just boil it down to, it'll give them a red and a smashers, it doesn't sound like a lot until you see that on top of all of the interactions that Tier Elements can already put together. Because it's so hard to whittle Tier Elements down to 0 interactions. It always feels like one interaction just leads to another.
Yeah. I think it's one of those decks where you're allowed to just have huge power swings when anything resolves, and the sprite cards are just there to inch your way forward. Because I think tier limits are really, really good at forcing every interaction the other deck has, and if you have a secondary engine after that point, that engine's like almost surely to resolve.
Which is basically what we see with the sprite package.
We saw it with the branded package earlier as well. It's like one of those things where these hybrid strategies, because a lot of these decks have been really counter tier right now, they've been a little watered down to make room for those additional support cards to try to have a chance going second. These hybrid strategies have been just trying to force their way through instead, and they've been having a good showing.
Yeah, that's been the case all weekend. So heading here into game 2, is there anything that you're looking at in terms of the side decks or how these strategies might adapt what they're doing to give themselves a better chance?
Obviously, Marcus really wants to go first now. I think he's going to try to set up something along the lines of the Testudo Newman. With the Mannequin Cat, he's going to want to limit the summons that Chris LeBlanc can do as much as possible, but the sprite engine makes it a lot easier to play around that. You do have monsters that are summonable within that region, but I think if he does access that engine to try to do that, he's going to lock himself into 2s, and I think that's something that Marcus is very okay with at this point, if he has to lead with the 2s instead of going with the tier limit monsters.
Would you consider putting in the Thunder King Ryo?
I feel like it's just not enough, right? Like, they're not doing enough with the sprite engine, but it's going to be up to Marcus to figure out how he wants to play this through here going into game 2. Opening starter and smashers in Chris's hand. That's not really what you want to see. Fine in a regular sprite deck, not really good in the tier limit sprite deck. You really want to lead with that tier limit strategy.
You also now have 0 targets for Sprite Jet.
Yeah, that's... I mean, that just means blue is always going to have to search red. But then I guess starter is just that much worse because it's just a random extender. Again, not really a card you ever want to see early. We get to start with the Flashing Fire, going for the Hugin, using its effect, discarding a card, going to try to grab the Runic Field Spell.
This is really that point of interaction where Marcus does that check. Does Chris have a hand interruption like Infinite Impermanence, Effect Failure, some of those types of cards which have fallen out of popularity in some of these tier element strategies?
Right. No, none of those cards, but we do have Havness, which has been extremely powerful so far. That's a good hit. That's, you know, we'll take the Sullic.
We will.
Could have been a lot worse for Marcus, but I think this is an acceptable route for Christopher as well.
This is not the counter.
And when you're playing a card like Hugin, you really have to take into consideration how popular those types of cards are, because the discard can be very costly. And if that gets met with Infinite Impermanence or Effect Failure, you're not going to get access to the field spell. But because those cards have waned in popularity, being able to reliably get the field spell basically every turn 1 is just a huge advantage of sprite decks that incorporate the Runic package.
So Christopher hard opening the Sprite Smashers might really come in handy here because he's able to use it on the fountain when Marcus has just no reason to expect it.
Yeah.
Did you cut?
It'll be interesting to see whether or not Marcus can try to resolve his field spell before Chris actually establishes the conditions necessary to use Smashers, actually getting some type of monster on the field that works with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that difficult because I think just honestly going into Dark to really access the Sprite engine might be what Christopher wants to do when you have Sprite monsters in your deck already.
It'll see. It'll depend how early Marcus decides to use his quick plays in order to actually activate the fountain.
Yeah. I think this is one of those situations where Smashers is going to banish the starter in his hand.
Yes, I was thinking that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw an interaction at a regional I attended last week where the opponent was under Dimensional Shifter, but they were able to utilize Sprite Smasher. Something that you definitely need to consider is that you can always banish from your hand if you don't have a Sprite card in the graveyard.
Yeah, and something you don't expect to do. I think it was very reminiscent of Sword Soul. You can also do the same thing with Chi-Shao by banishing a worm from your hand. Really similar cards. Also worth noting that Cap Shell was sent to the graveyard for the effect of Hugin as cost. Now, that card being able to be revived by the effect of Sprite Elf is going to be really useful for the draw. But we also see a Sprite Carrot in the graveyard. We have to wonder which one is Marcus going to choose. I feel like most of the time you're going for the Cap Shell here. The Carrot is not nearly as powerful against the tier element strategy on its own. You're more likely to go for something like red.
Does the fact that Chris is playing the Sprite package change that at all?
I feel like the spells weren't really like that important in the Sprite engine either. I feel like you're still going for red, so it seems like even more reason to go for red. Not like you would really have an option here, though, because you would have to use a starter, which I don't think he has used yet, actually.
It is interesting, though. Chris is playing 19 spell cards.
Activate effective special.
He's playing a myriad of spell cards, including Triple Tactics Talent, plus any that he could have in his side deck as well.
I'm looking at these spell cards, though I don't think any of them, outside of something like the field spell Pearl Arena or Instant Fusion, are ones that you'd really even want to try to use your effect on.
That's fair.
Or it's just super polymerization when you don't really don't have a
fair.
choice, do you?
And Cap Shell can always draw into quick plays, which if you have Runic Fountain on the field, you can just activate right away. So unlike other times where drawing quick plays aren't all that desirable on your opponent's turn, it's quite different with Cap Shell in the Runic Sprite deck.
Yeah, can I come before?
Yeah.
Yeah, Marcus being able to resolve a Runic Fountain here this time, that's usually a really good sign. Whenever you can get that
Sweaty.
immediate
No, it
advantage
is, like, so
by
sweaty.
resolving Fountain, then you are just
Alright,
that
so
much
you got
farther
some.
ahead. Fountain already did its job, basically, by drawing 2 more cards. And he did draw Starter as well as Runic Slumber. So it's not really
Use your starter off.
going to turn off next turn. You can guarantee at least 1 draw. Slumber is not really the one that you want to use as an interruption, but it's at least going to keep a monster alive. Really important in like the Sprite mirror match, but unfortunately against Tier Limit, they probably have too many monsters for that to matter.
I would agree. But it is something.
But Marcus does have Smashers in hand, he has Starter in hand, he has Slumber in hand, plenty of quick play spells that are going to be powerful. Opting to use a Starter now, is going to be able to special summon that. I have to hope Sprite Red in this instance.
That would make the most sense. Carrot's obviously in the graveyard. You already have Smashers, so you don't need Jet. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to go right here into Sprite Red. Underneath the Sprite Elf.
Yeah, you want to make sure you are really paying attention to your zones when it comes to Sprite Elf. You want to pick and choose which monsters you want to prioritize not having the targeted ability.
Activate effect, target Cap Shell.
Yep, opting for the Cap Shell here instead of the Carrot. I think just valuing a draw that much more. I wonder if he's going to go for something along the lines of IP Masquerena, or if there's a different link too he had in mind. Nope, just going straight for IP Masquerena. Getting the normal play here.
It also gives him the option of reviving the Cap Shell through Elf's effect on the following turn and getting an additional draw.
I think he drew 1 new card that we have not seen activated yet. The Destructive Karma Cannon.
Ooh, and we saw Marcus in the feature match area yesterday. That was a card we really hoped to see, and I'm really glad that he drew it because it's a brand new card out of Darkwing Blast, a card that we've yet to really see this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to honestly have a very similar effect to Slumber, where you're able to use it in a way where you can protect your monsters if you want to just clog up the zones, or if you're just trying to block the field as much as possible.
Good.
Mannequin Cat, as we talked about, there's a variety of cards that Marcus can special summon out of his deck with Mannequin Cat, or anywhere, but presumably out of his deck at this point.
Pearl Reno is in the hand, but he also has a copy of Fenrir. Unfortunate that the Havness is still on the field, not going to be able to use that immediately, but potentially could bait it out. Has to be very careful here. He can't just go normal summoning something along the lines of Thunder King, Rhino Heart.
Sure.
Your typical normal summon that we've seen so many times, because if he does, he's able to just go for the Mannequin Cat. It's a water, right? So you're able to go into the Testudo or Newman.
A card that we saw in the winning deck list last week, YCS Utrip, Joshua Schmidt's side deck.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why it was so good back then is the surprise factor. When you don't know what's coming, you don't know what you're going to be restricted by. Obviously, throughout the tournament, once you get deeper into Top Cut, it's going to be more of a known thing. But especially here in top 4 of the next event after, it's going to be extremely known and something that Christopher will be very much aware of.
The interesting thing with Mannequin Cat is it toolboxes anything. So the list of possibilities is truly endless, and it really benefits players that look deep into the Yu-Gi-Oh card pool and find some of those cards that may have never seen play before and incorporate them into decks when the attribute or the type line up.
Absolutely. I think it really just gives those players willing to just put in that extra effort that much of an edge. Christopher really thinking through his plays here. He knows that there's a lot that Marcus could do. He needs to be able to navigate appropriately, make sure he can get the most out of every card in his hand.
I will chain Elf.
Target.
So we see here Marcus having the option of bringing back either the Cap Shell or the Sprite Carrot.
Sure.
Looks like he's going for the Carrot and then chaining Smashers, trying to get rid of the field spell, I imagine. Going to banish, I assume, the starter in the graveyard.
And probably the elf on his field.
Yeah, no, having been used already.
Yeah, there is all the.
Oh, you're right. I apologize.
Going to get rid of the field spell here. Both players understanding how powerful the field spell is. It makes a lot of sense why that would be removed in this instance. You know, that's a lot of value gone. It's going to potentially threaten another card later, and then dealing with the monster that it searches immediately seems like a good choice.
Do you think there's any value of bringing back the cap shell so that you had
Okay.
a more ideal target to link summon with the IP?
Yes.
I think so. There's not going to be that many spells beyond this point now that the Pelourinho is used that I want to even imagine using Carrot for. Like, what do you think the main target is now? What do you expect him to use? Maybe he's really afraid of another copy of Triple Tactics now that he sees one in the graveyard.
Yeah, that could definitely be one. And again, these players so far into the tournament may have some knowledge, having sat next to each other in previous rounds, that the card like Triple Tactics Talent is in Chris's deck.
All right, next we get to lead off with the Tournament Shard.
Sure.
This is the card, I think, that is, other than Havness, the most likely to make things go array. Like, it has such high roll potential. And look at that. That's all
Your
3
turn,
names
player,
that you can
do you
trigger
have
right now.
anything you'd like to trigger?
Merly, Sharon, and Havness. Wow.
Yeah, a Sprite
yes,
Blue
I'm
additionally, but
going to-
Havness was discarded for the effect. So all 3 names are now in the graveyard. There's not really a way to stop all of them. But also, you don't really want to use all of them immediately right now.
No chain mannequin count to the summoner.
All right, so this is the problem. He's able to go into the
Testudo?
Newman.
Yep.
And Chris just said Testudo. He knows.
I'm wondering what he will do as an answer. He does have that Smasher still in hand.
Havness.
He is not going to be able to fusion summon anything but Garura in this instance. But then he will be able to immediately go into a Link 2. I think he only activated the Havness. I'm not sure if he activated all of them.
You wouldn't want to activate all of them knowing that
Yeah.
Mannequin Cat is clearly on the field. You want to activate one to bait it out, but obviously you don't want to use all of your effects if you know that it's going to end with this.
So now it's a question of what he's going to make.
I think he used Havness. I think that was the one that he did in fact activate.
Makes a lot of sense. He does have one on the field. I think he just wants to put those back in the deck as soon as he can, shuffle the deck up, and then try to gain access to again later. Probably put that card back in his hand if he can.
And you never want to use Merly because you can just send it with Sprite Sprint.
Exactly. Like, that's always the one that you're going to use last now. It kind of was one of the ones that you'd always use last before, but now it's just even more of a priority to make sure that's still available for you because of Sprite Sprint. Oh, it looks like he's attempting to enter battle. The Newman is very small, so you're just dealing with it in the battle phase is fine. Maybe you're going to bait out
That's
the IP Masquerena here. Luckily, now that the elf is off the field, you're not going to be able to go into anything like Avermax to try to make sure you can't use your battle phase.
1,000.
Oh, interesting. He's going to let the IP Masquerena die.
58, right?
Well, he's also locked under the effect of Testudo, so I wonder if he has a Link monster that he could actually summon.
Well, I was wondering if it was, in fact, the Daruma cannon that we saw, if he would use it here.
That's fair.
It looks like he's thinking about activating the Sprite starter. He's going to go straight into the Sprite engine now.
You're looking over his deck list. The only thing he could have went into was a
Battle
Sprite
phase?
Elf, but that really wouldn't help.
I think, like, the Newman just says you can't summon anything with 1,800 or more attack, right?
Yeah, both players. Neither player can special summon monster with 1,800 or more attack.
So, if he activated Havness, was he not able to summon Garura because it only has 1,500 attack?
Cards in hand too.
Oh, I guess that's a fair point.
I guess,
Uh,
I'm not sure if both players missed that here.
Allow it.
Effect.
Sure.
I'm going to take the life first.
It's 69.
Yep, Chris taking the 1100 for the summon of Sprite Blue because of the starter. Now the Smashers is going to be live. There's a level 2 on the
I'm at
field.
58
You're gonna be able
hit
to
69.
Use the effect, grab.
Yes.
It looks like he's opting for Sprite Red.
Something that definitely goes under the Testudo limitation.
Yeah, I assume all the Sprite cards would.
Almost summoned.
Oh, yes.
No.
Until they make a new one.
That's finally the big man Sprite. 2000 attack, level 2. So I believe it's
No,
still
they were,
battle
like, asking,
phase.
like, stuff in between.
It's mostly for how long it took between your last last attack and deciding to activate Snowball,
Okay.
and how long to decide on something.
Yeah, Chris is getting a bit of a slow
Okay,
play warning
understood.
here because of the amount of time it took to declare an attack and then activate Sprite Starter.
Main phase 2.
Going into main phase 2,
Special summon.
opting to not remove the turtle. Going to link summon using the Sprite Blue as well as the Halfness on the field. Looks like he's opting to go into Sprite Sprint.
Yep.
Now, this is where the Nimble cards in the deck could really find use, right?
Depends. He's also limited by Testudo. He's limited by two things. He's into only
And
level
I
2,
have,
rank 2, and then also Testudo's
trying
effect.
to
So
use Havness,
it'll be
correct?
interesting to see
Yeah.
what he can choose to go into. He still has access to IP Masquerade, and that would be one of the possible link 2s that he could go into. It'll be really impressive to see Chris navigate through this game state where he can only use the level 2 restriction and the rank 2, etc., but then also play under Testudo. Because even if he goes into IP Masquerade, he's still locked under that restriction with Testudo into the following turn, unless he uses the Sprite Smashes in his hand.
I imagine when he feels ready to do so, because at any point he could just activate the IP Masquerade because Elf is a legal target in the extra to summon, and then if your opponent just lets it happen, you just chain Smashers and they might catch him off guard. But I think now that he has seen the starter resolve and you have the guy on the field, I feel like Marcus should be very aware of Smashers because he could have obviously gone for Jet if he wanted to. Chris really stressing himself out, thinking about his options here. It looks like he does have a Sullic in hand as well, so he might just try to... Oh, he's going to activate the Smashers now so he can have the Sullic live, maybe?
That's great.
It seems like honestly an odd turn. I would not have expected this turn to have gone this way.
They're just a very complex turn. Mannequin Cat has really
2 in hand.
made this turn quite complex. So he's banishing Sprite Blue for Sprite Smashers. I wonder what would happen if he used Destructive Daruma right here.
Well, yeah, I think because it's a banish effect, they will not count as level 2 face up on the field.
read
So,
Smasher?
but he does have the sprint.
But it would be sent to the graveyard because it can't go face down.
This is true. Yeah, I guess that's one of the few hard outs to cast Smashers, and I think he's thinking about it right now.
I know. I really want this to happen.
You control.
Oh, well, let's see. Let's hope that is the card that we saw.
I think Marcus is reading his own copy of Sprite Smashes to not give away the information that he's trying to figure out exactly how this interaction might work.
Yeah. Oh, I think he's going to do it. Oh, no, he's just going to use Carrot. That's going to force out the red. And then now he chains it. I don't know what difference that would make, but that card was already leaving the field, but here it is, the Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon.
A brand new release in Darkwing Blast. I think it's a TCG exclusive world premiere card.
Absolutely it is. Brand new here and fresh into top 4.
I think that card's artwork is also a throwback to a tournament pack 1 or 2 normal monster, I believe.
Yep.
So it just changes everything?
Was it just like, wasn't it not like Daruma Cannon?
I think that was the name of the
Yeah.
card. So it's really exciting to see an additional Darkwing Blast card activated here in the top 4 of YCS Minneapolis.
I just have to assume that Marcus wasn't aware of how the interaction would work with Sprite Spin. He was like forgetting that all
It
the
just
other
says you
monsters that are in
control.
attack position would just have to go to graveyard. Didn't have to use the Carrot here, but it would be able to keep the Mannequin Cat.
I have to resolve Smashers, correct? This is gonna die. Oh, that dies on this
Oh,
chain link,
I
and
didn't
this
even
will
realize
resolve.
it uses all your monsters as well.
So we're resolving the chain at this point.
Yeah.
Asking
Yeah.
finish resolving Sprite Smashers. Alright, so you can't use a face down level indirect to monster to banish
Yep, just confirming because it's not a tribute of a card. That's usually the mechanic that allows you to use face down monsters, tributes, and fusions. So Smashers will not be able to use those
So it
face down
just
monsters.
fizzles, right?
Yep, not going to be able to resolve with effect. Has a lone Fenrir and Sullic in hand. Not going to be able to use either of those here unless he hasn't used his normal summon. Then he can, I believe, still tribute summon the Fenrir.
Possibly. And this is Chris's first turn, so he's not going to be able to flip any of these face-down monsters face up this turn. Definitely something to consider when using Destructive Cannon.
There was one Havness that could have been flipped face up because it was there last turn, but that was used to link summon the Sprite Sprint.
Ah, yes. Definitely something to consider. Between those and the Bestials, you could presumably have a monster on your opponent's first turn that you could then flip summon.
Oh, it looks like he's going to be conducting a tribute summon here for the Fenrir. I think that does make a lot of sense right now. Getting rid of a beaver, and I'm not sure what else.
Summon.
This is main phase 2, so he's not going to be able to do much else. It looks like both beavers were tribute summoned here.
Good.
Presumably he still has Fenrir's in his deck, so he'll be able to search one.
Yeah.
Effect.
It's really interesting to see Fenrir hit the field
Good.
after Sprite starter. Typically your mindset would be like, oh, this card will never hit the field. You're locked into level 2s, but that's not the case when you
Freezing
tribute
curses,
summon.
right?
Yeah, I was literally thinking the same thing. The normal summon is just allowed when you use something along the lines of Sprite Starter or Gigantic Sprite. So, you know, sometimes you will just have a very large body in the level 7 Fenrir.
Could be destruction. You could be mind gaming me.
Yep, just goes ahead and sets one to the Spell and Trap
Destruction,
Zone.
isn't it? Your turn.
Destruction would be crazy here if Marcus had it being able to resolve Fountain and then being able to just have that many more cards going into the next turn. Marcus does not have a battle phase this turn. This is his first turn
much time
that
is
he
left?
would have had a battle phase, so he has not been able to skip it just yet.
I will go stand by main phase.
What monster did he get to keep again from the room again?
Activate effect of special.
Let's see. He had Carrot on the field. That's gone. Mannequin Cat. It's the turtle.
Oh, yeah, it is the turtle. Okay, I guess you might as well just wait for a while before flipping that face up.
It's actually kind of interesting. You can now special summon yourself and then just flip it up in main phase 2, or even main phase 1. But once you're finished special summoning, then you can flip that up.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be what Marcus wants to do. Going to use the effect of Runic Slumber to special summon Jerry, level 4 monster, and then use the effect of Sprite Starter so that he's able to summon the level 4 monster before he's locked into level 2s here.
I wonder if that's an additional synergy that he realized when constructing the side deck, that Destructive Cannon
You have one card now?
with Testudo is actually quite
Uh-huh.
interesting.
What's on them?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're really trying to protect your monsters. It's very similar to cards like Enemy Controller and Runic Slumber that have been used in this strategy multiple times, or as well as Pixies, where you really want to protect your cards from your opponent's battle phase because they're all so small.
You
And I
activated-
think this card really fits that category really well. That's probably why he decided to include it in his strategy.
With the added benefit of flipping it face down so that you're unlocked on your own turn.
Yeah, so I think it's really finding a card that's like effectively Mirror Force, but also torrential. Like maybe just one of the more powerful trap cards we've seen in a long time.
Thinking. I'm going to use the effect.
Gonna chain freezing curses. Target to negate.
So now we see Freezing Curses come down to negate Fenrir.
How many?
Three banish top 3.
There we see a Grief, a Nimble Angler, as well as a Cosmic Cyclone. Now I think he's going to be using the Fountain. There's multiple runic spells in the graveyard. He's going to get a lot of draws out of this.
Targeting 2.
Looks like it is for 2. Drawing 2 is plenty.
Grief is a card we haven't really seen a lot this weekend.
Yeah, we've seen it a couple of times. Most of the time, it essentially just puts a monster in the field, puts it right in the grave, essentially the same as Foolish Burial, and then able to trigger a Tearlament effect. It's kind of along the lines of High Spirits,
So
but
life
High
is
Spirits,
47,
at least,
Correct.
I mean, unfortunately, you do have to have the Tearlament monster in your hand, but at least it fulfills the full fusion requirement immediately, where I think that's what Grief is really missing, is that you still need the other card regardless. So I think most players opt to go for the High Spirits instead, because it's effectively the same card, but it generates a lot more for you.
Either way, Chris is here in the top 4 with 3 copies of Terramon's Grief in his deck.
Yeah, maybe even trying to capitalize off the effect it has in the graveyard. When it's sent, it's able to add back any banished spell trap, I believe. Maybe just trap, but yeah. The Wind-Up Kitten coming in nicely here, putting the Fenrir back in the hand, although he might just have to tribute summon it again. One of the 2 that is in his hand.
Huh?
How did Wonder Kid get onto the field?
I normal summoned it. Can I see your graveyard real fast?
The Wind-Up Kitten was just confirmed normal summoned by Marcus.
Looks like Chris's hand is just 2 copies of Fenrir.
Yep.
The one from the kitten and then the one that he starts last turn.
Yep, off the other Fenrir. He's going to have to work to get himself out of this one. Looks like Marcus is going to try to play cleanup as much as he can. Unfortunately, trying to use the effect of the kitten to put these monsters back in his hand, not really useful because they do go directly back in the hand. And that was a Sheeran. So I think that's actually a card that Chris would love to have in his hand right now.
It's really important that when you
Cards in
use Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon and then you plan on using Wind Up Kitten, that you know exactly which monsters were set where.
It's one of the more awkward parts of the runic strategy because you don't have your battle phase. You're forced to do interruptions like this. I think these situations where the Onibimaru, as we see here, is really important, going after the other monster. Hopefully Marcus was aware of which one was which, and he is not picking the wrong one, because this is just a sprite red. I think he would be much happier leaving the sprite red on the field and then making sure the Sheeran is banished and then putting the red back in the hand.
Yeah, that would make sense because now, once your element card, and Chris is right back into this.
Maybe he's just relying on being able to flip up the Numen and then making the Sheeran have no impact.
I guess that's possible.
Yeah, he's able to go for another copy of Elf here, so making it really difficult for Chris to remove both.
If I'm not mistaken, though, doesn't Chris have Celiac set?
He does. That he does. But I'm not really sure if Marcus knows that.
And now Testudo has to be in face-up attack position.
Yeah. At least, luckily for Chris, he doesn't have, or luckily for Marcus, rather, he can't special summon the Fenrir because of the Numen. Has plenty of attack.
You have 1 card in?
He could normal summon the Sheeran.
Then just use its effect. I wonder if you would even bother using your normal summon. Does the Numen say over 1800 or equal to and over 1800?
I'll double check for us because that is potentially very important.
Activate?
Well, he's
I'm
attempting
sorry,
to
I
activate the
think I'm
Sheeran.
confused. I apologize. It's 1800 or more?
1800 or more, yeah,
Oh,
they
wait,
actually just clarified that.
You're right, you're right.
Perfect. So,
Or more attack, right?
Wait, it's
Cannot-
18 or more?
More,
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
can't.
So you can.
Yep.
so he's going to have to normal summon it.
I will normal summon.
This is why it's a pretty good time to have 2 elves.
So still in main.
Yeah, because you can attack over one and it just fundamentally doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, Elf is going to target the IP. IP is really strong here, going to be able to try to, if the Numen is removed, going into something along the lines of maybe Appaloosa, going into just any one of the more powerful Link monsters that are in Marcus's extra deck. But it really just depends on what Chris chooses to prioritize answering. He's going to use the Sulik on the Numen. So the Elf is going to resolve, but then he will be able to activate the effect of Sheeran. And this is all still in the main phase because Elf had to be used in the main phase, so Christopher does not have to go into the battle phase now, and he has that Foolish Burial. And then now, if there's anything that tries to interact with the Sheeran, he still has the ability to summon the Fenrirs from hand as well.
Yeah, so this is a pretty good set of plays here for Chris. It's going to give him at least some flexibility to try and navigate his way through the board.
Yep, there's going to be the Avermax, double untargetable by its own effect, as well as the Sprite Elf.
This
That
is
is,
negated.
And
that is actually not a legal play, because the IP Masquerena was summoned from the graveyard. Avermax has to use monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. That is not a legal summon here.
hopefully the players catch it.
We get notify the judges on that one. Just make sure this is cleared up before it gets a little too complicated.
47 to 69.
Oh, fuck. Oh, wait.
You
Did
negated
happen?
this.
Yeah, I know that. Trying to think. So yeah, resolve. I was so confused. I'm sorry.
You're good, dude.
There's 2.
Okay.
So I've used Sharon. Apologize for that. Effect.
Okay.
I have normal summoned already.
Yes. Sure.
Going to be able to use the effect of Kick Close, adding another copy of Sheer in the hand. Now he can use its effect to special summon.
Activate.
Sure.
Going to get up one of those Fenrirs.
Looks like he sends Super Poly, Nimble Beaver, and Instant Fusion.
This is not okay. You have dark in there?
Oh, that's possible.
I do have a dark.
So Avermax will summon through IP and Sprite Elf, yes?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Good. It looks like the judges were able
You
to
can
find
summon
out.
it,
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 extra monsters.
It had to be monster special summon from the extra deck.
Which means I think he can only go into another Sprite Elf. Like, was he, maybe Nightmare Unicorn was a legal target?
Yeah, Unicorn. There are plenty of legal targets available. Yeah, this is one of those situations that's really easy to mix. I remember when I first read Avermax, there's so many effects on that card. It's really easy to miss one. Sometimes you even forget about its ability when it's sent to the graveyard to shuffle back a card, but it's extremely easy to miss that it's not just 2 monsters that are like just extra deck types, but they are specifically 2+ monsters summoned from the extra deck. This is a common thing that you have to remember with things like Shadal Fusion. It's very similar. If you summon a Dante from graveyard with the effect of Sir, you cannot use Shadal Fusion to summon from the deck because it's summoned from the graveyard, not from the extra deck, and that's the same rule that applies here.
Yeah, that was interactions from a few years ago with Shadal Fusion, very similar to what we see here with Avermax. When we return back to the game, were there anything that you found surprising so far in this matchup?
I'm a little interested in how Chris decided to use his line of play and how he wants to really use his smashes. Also, the Daruma cannon, I think it wasn't used as properly as it could have been. There could have been a lot more value gained. He would have potentially kept the Mannequin Cat on his field. You know, just give him some more bodies, ability to apply more pressure. Right? If you imagine just having the Mannequin on the field, then you're able to use it again on your opponent's turn, just being able to summon another monster from your deck. Like, it's very easy to just summon another Sprite Blue or like just something else in your engine to try to just generate more advantage.
You also could just summon the Newman back from the graveyard. So if you were to actually get rid of it, you would still have that flexibility with Mannequin Cat of just summoning it back out of the graveyard. So it would have been interesting to see how that turn would have played out if he still had Mannequin Cat on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't forget the Mannequin Cat just for some reason summons a monster from anywhere. Really one of those overlooked rank 2 monsters that's proven to be quite powerful again and again. I think the last time I saw Mannequin Cat being used, it was used in some Tri-Brigade strategies because you were able to target an Ash Blossom in the graveyard and special summon a Fractal from your deck. And I hadn't seen much play since then, but now it's doing quite a lot more than that.
Which is really surprising. The fact that you can summon any card, any monster at least, in the entire game, depending on the format and depending on what strategies are popular, it's actually quite surprising that it's taken this long for it to see this rise in popularity.
I think all it took was a strategy that was able to summon that many level 2 monsters, right? There were level 2 monsters in the Tri-Brigade deck, but that wasn't primarily what you were going for. Now this is just all level 2s everywhere. Same idea with Capshell and Hyperia, right? All it took was something to really give them that opening. Eventually it'll happen for Cup of Ace too. I know we're going to draw 2 cards soon.
Oh, that's another throwback, Cup of Ace.
Yeah, like any draw card has to have its value sometime. I remember, I think it was Ryan Levine who once said, if everyone in the world just agreed that it's always heads, Cup of Ace is pot of greed.
That is true. Maybe someday there'll be a coin flipping strategy that will benefit from a card like Cup of Ace.
Yeah, like there could easily be a card printed that just says you can just control whichever the coin flip is. Honestly, I think that card already exists.
I think it's an Arcana Force card, actually.
Yeah, I think that card does in fact exist, and it's one of those things that will maybe see play. There's cool gimmicks everywhere, but I think these cards were just a little bit more accessible. You know, just normal summon draw card, a lot simpler than having to control a coin flip, and that's why Hyperia, Capshell, really strong in this list. Mannequin Cat, again, just 2 level 2s, able to essentially summon any monster. Pretty strong.
We've seen now Destructive Daruma Cannon, or Karma Cannon for the very first time in the game that we've been watching. What are your thoughts on it after seeing it for the first time?
Again, I don't think it was used as properly as it could have been, but I think it was very effective right now. It put Chris really far behind. I think one of the other issues is it didn't really... I feel like, again, it was used improperly after the monsters were set. Putting the Sheeran back in hand, I think, was a lot more of a liability than just putting the red back in hand. I think he was a little bit too comfortable behind the Newman, but now this gives an opening, given he didn't know that there was going to be a Celican available. But I think it was just a lot more useful to make sure the Sheeran was just not accessible with something like Onibimar versus the red, because the red's not going to do that much harm.
I think it was interesting to see the interaction against Sprite Smashers and realizing that all of the level 2s are going to be set, all of the rank 2s, but the link 2s are not, but they're going to be sent to the graveyard anyway through its effect, meaning it can completely trade for Sprite Smashers, and if you get to open with Cannon against a Sprite deck, you also can ensure that they can't flip up any of those.
Yeah, I always thought that Daruma Cannon would have its place in this particular format against the Sprite strategy, but I think this just goes to show even more reason if it's able to be used in counter of the Smashers. But let's look at the bracket here. It looks like Michael Temez is already victorious against Cody Angelov and is moving on to the finals, so he is waiting for the winner of this match.
I believe he's playing Flawonderese, which means Cody was unable to beat Flawonderese back-to-back.
Yeah, he is one of the only players in the top 4 that is not a champion yet, so he is trying to take that chance, make it through all these other extremely powerful competitors, and prove that he is worthy of being that title holder as well.
So we can guarantee that we have a Flawonderese player in the finals, and we'll get to see momentarily when we get back to the action whether it's going to be Chris or Marcus joining him in that pivotal final match today.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting bracket so far because we had so many tier limits, we had so many sprites, and there was a handful of other decks. There was, what, 3 Fluandre's players, there was an Exorcister player, there was a Dragon Link player. I think those were the only decks that I remember off the top of my head that weren't in some capacity Tearlament or Sprite. Oh, there was also a Thunder Dragon deck as well. But like at least those decks, they had some bestial, yeah, they had some bestial engine, right?
What'll be interesting is if Marcus can pull this out, he'll take a deck without any tier elements to the finals.
Yeah, like that would be the biggest shock, honestly, in this tournament. You know, I've been rooting for Tearlament this entire time. I've been talking about how powerful this strategy is. If there's not even a single Tearlament in the final after the domination it had moving into the top 32, I would be so shocked.
Especially because we have so many hybrid versions of pure elements. And there's really only been a couple decks that have elected to play 0 copies. Instead, we're going to have potentially, right, this is all contingent on Marcus pulling out the match that we're currently watching, a deck that was actually effective last weekend in Runic Sprite up against Fluandre's, which has been an effective card for months now.
Yep, it looks like the players have rewinded. They have adjusted the game state. So we're back to the IP Masquerena activating its effect. It's going to be forced to link summon with other monsters on the field. It's going to use Unicorn with the negated Newman, being able to potentially use its effect. I don't think he will, considering there's like an empty field at this point. And then the Sheeran will resolve. Going to go into that kick close and resolve. I believe the rest of this should kind of go as normal.
I don't think we got too many plays ahead. I think we can proceed more or less as normal from here.
So chain link 1.
Yep, just being able to...
Would you like to target?
Yeah, he's able to actually use the effect of Unicorn now. Honestly, this is pretty good.
So far?
Yeah, that's how you
Targeting the Sullic?
Just making sure.
No, he went after the kick close that was summoned because it
Oh,
was
yes,
summoned in the
yes.
form of
Okay.
chain.
Yep. I was thinking the moment it hit the field, yeah. You still needed to resolve and summon hit Kalos.
Yep, so being able to add the Sheer in the hand, this could honestly prove to be better for Marcus.
Potentially. The thing with Avermax is as good as it is, if it's clearly there on the field and you have many plays remaining, you can try and navigate your way through it.
Oh, but now actually there is no monster on the field, so the Fenrir is able to be summoned. That's actually pretty strong. And now the Sheeran is able to use the other Fenrir. It hits a Merly, hits an Angler.
Ooh, now we have to check how many Nimble Beavers does he have remaining in his
Oh,
deck.
0. That was the last one.
Well, at least it filters out a draw that wouldn't be that ideal from this point.
Yeah, it also just felt good to see, you know, like brings up the hype level just in case, but there are 3 Beavers in the graveyard. So essentially able to use the Merly now. Again, a Merly is not one that you really want to use because you could have just accessed it much later in the combo with something like Sprite Sprint, but still better than nothing.
Certainly if your hand is down to just a couple cards and you're really hoping to hit something off Sheeran, beggars can't be choosers at that point. You'll take them early.
Yeah. And now one of the biggest things for Chris is if he's able to go into the battle phase, he does have this kit to be able to hit another 5 cards, but as soon as Fenrir declares an attack, he's probably just going to go after the fountain, right?
Oh, yes. I would 100% go after the fountain here.
Yeah, the other monsters are going to die easily just by battle. So he just has to limit Marcus to having the least amount of cards as possible.
And you want to shut him off from drawing a runic quick play on the following turn. That certainly can go into another field spell, but locks him out of at least initially getting that immediate draw.
Yeah, and it's also just so expensive, right? You have to give up another card in hand. I don't even know how many cards Marcus has in hand at this point.
The way his hands are folded, I'm not sure if he has any, quite frankly, because he just had to discard off of Unicorn.
Yeah, so that might just...
The summon effect? No.
He has not used the effect to mill off Merly. He has, in fact, used the effect in the graveyard. And there's the 5 from the Kiklos and the 3 from the... So we have used Sheeran, we have used Merly, and this is the last effect here, Havness. Maybe going for something along the lines of Rule Close. That might just cut off everything, right?
Yeah, because then you have the fountain cleared, and you have any special summons cleared.
Right, and then you just also still have Sullic, you still have tier limit monsters on the field. This is quite the strong turn now for Chris. I think now he's just clean to go into the battle phase.
Yep.
Keep in mind that Sprite Red also does come back to the field during the end phase.
Which is one of the reasons he might value keeping Merly on the field or at least having a Link 2, which
Yeah.
is presumably what he's about to do.
He's just going to, you go for Dark even. I thought he was just going to go straight for Elf, but this makes a lot of sense. There's plenty of bodies that he can use in the graveyard of Marcus. Maybe he goes for a Sprite blue of his own. Keep in mind, we did see Starter and Jet in Chris's opening hand, so there's not much value that Sprite monsters can give. it would be really useful, I guess, if he had a Sprite Carrot right now, but basically every single Sprite monster Chris already has access to. But he's going to take the IP Masquerade, that's not a bad one.
No, IP Masquerade is a fantastic one.
Yep, Dark, unlike Elf, can be used for a Link Summon this turn. Going to immediately use those two. Hopefully he remembers, not Avermax, but we are going into Access Code Talker.
Wow.
Target.
Yep, going up to 4,300 with the Link 2. Going to be able to use its effect. Probably going to go after that Mystery Set. After all this time, if we did know it, I forgot it by now. It looks like it is starter.
Response.
Nope.
Were those both Dark?
The
Oh, I'm sorry. It does not
Oh,
target.
it doesn't
Sprite
actually.
Sprint.
Sorry, that was my
Oh,
mistake.
sorry.
Sprite Sprint
Totally
is
spacing
Dark,
out.
right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's two Darks that he attempted to banish off of the access code. Not that I think it particularly matters right now. Yeah.
It was summoned off IP, I guess.
Oh yeah, like again, yeah, sure. Like,
Oh, no, it's a fire. I'm sorry.
oh okay, okay.
Sweet.
From this
Summoned off of
angle,
IP.
it looks like a dark, but it's a fire.
Okay, that makes sense. All the Link monsters in that archetype have been fire so far, so it would only make sense.
I'm sorry.
Sure. Freeze play.
Okay,
There's
no.
making sure to confirm everything is shipshape here. The unicorn was summoned off of IP. This access code is also summoned off IP. We actually cleared this up in a previous situation because we were worried about how this would interact with Avermax. But a monster summoned with an IP taken from your opponent, we were always wondering, it could be this weird scenario because the IP is technically your opponent's. It's activating in their graveyard, so whose opponent is it that can't destroy the effects? It works as you want it to. The monster cannot be destroyed by that monster's opponent's effects.
43, yeah.
So that access code will not be destroyed by card effects because of that IP.
18.
It's an important interaction to know of.
Yep.
Attack over. Effect on attack declaration vanish.
Oh, he's actually just going straight for game here.
Yeah, if this is enough damage, you know, who cares about the Runic Fountain?
Yeah, Christopher LeBlanc moves on into the finals, has a chance to go for the four-peat. Marcus not able to defend his title this time, but honestly, great job getting it all the way into top 4.
I mean, considering he's a previous YCS champion here in Minnesota, that was a heck of a title defense.
Yeah, great showing.
Procedural errors, which is just like, bro, I know the nerves be